Please rise and join the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Meeting of the Wahoo City Council, July 9th, 7 o'clock p.m. Open Meetings Act is posted on the wall.
Made it.
We now have a quorum within the council, and I'm not part of the quorum anymore. That's fine.
Yeah.
Call meeting to order and roll call.
Stuart Creechy.
Here.
Shane Sweet.
Here.
Chris Rappel.
Here.
Patrick Nagel.
Here.
Ryan Diaz. Carl Wortley.
Okay, proclamations, we have none. Before I open it up for anybody in the audience that has comments, we have a special guest tonight. Jim Anderson is from Ashland. He's the mayor of Ashland. A few months ago, I went down and we had an agreement that we were going to kind of exchange ideas, and I went down to one of their meetings, and so Jim's up here tonight to observe, and I'll ask him at the end of the meeting what mistakes we made. So,
Welcome, Jim.
okay, is there anybody in the audience that have something to comment on that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward with department head reports. EMS report by Chief Frank Anderson.
Good evening. Hi, Greg.
I feel like it's been a while since I've been up here, so this worked out well. I can kind of give you a 6-month overview of kind of how we've been operating here on the EMS department. I'll kind of start with our numbers. This year's been exceptionally busy compared to years past. We're at 468 total runs for the year. 376 of those are on the 911 side as far as our primary response goes, and then our transfers have been at 92, which has been up from years past. As far as the transfers go, we usually sit around 150 for the year. So that volume compared to this point, last year we're up 10%, which has been kind of our consistent trend over years past as far as our volumes go. So we're still kind of hitting that 10% mark annually as far as our increase. We did see a little bit of an increase as far as where our call volume lands in the county. Typically we're at the 18 to 20% of our calls are outside of the city limits of Wahoo. So far year to date, we're at actually about 23% of those calls. And I think that can be attributed not necessarily to primary response, but we've seen an increase in mutual aid requests, especially to like the Ceresco area due to some volunteer issues down there as far as staffing availability. We've had a few intercept calls with Preg and even a couple up north. So I think that some of that is just kind of an overall request from the county, not necessarily us covering the primary areas, but also mutual aid. So February was by far our busiest month with 70 total runs, and I wanted to highlight that our busiest hours of the day is right around that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. mark. And if I extend that to about 8 p.m., about 74% of our calls that we run are between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. So coincidentally, that's also kind of our worst staffing times. So the daytime hours, with supplementing with volunteers has been difficult. We're still averaging a little under 4 people per call overall. But as far as that time period between 7A and 7P, we're pretty consistently running calls with 2 or 3 people at most. And with our primary medic having to wait. So I also kind of wanted to highlight our response time. So with that time period, it kind of extends our response times out. So our current average response time, which is the time that we're requested to the time that we're on scene, is sitting right now at about 9 minutes and 14 seconds. The industry standard that we like to be at is less than 8 minutes. Now, that data is kind of suspect because of the area we cover, so it's kind of hard to capture response time metrics, like an urban environment where you have a very well-defined service area. That also includes us going out west of Weston or south of town. But so we're sitting at about 9 minutes and 14 seconds overall, with 80% of our call volume inside the city limits of Wahoo. We hit that 8-minute kind of benchmark only about 44% of the time this current year, so up January through June. So just something we try to keep an eye on as far as trends and patterns with staffing and response times. Those all kind of come together and how we want to kind of look to the future. So
question for you.
Yeah.
80% of your calls are in town.
Yep.
And you're hitting the 8-minute mark around 40% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Would the not hitting that 8-minute mark in town directly due to the staffing issues, or?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, obviously we staff a paramedic, right? But the ambulance rolling out the door is contingent on somebody driving them.
Sure.
So, a lot of times they got to sit and wait on the apron, for that driver. We've have an increase of personnel that volunteer for our department that actually don't live in the city limits. We got a few that live north of town, a few that live south of town, some come from the east side of town. So some of those guys are actually some of our better responders. So we have to wait at times for them to come into town from like County Road O is where one of them lives at. And so some of those guys that are more available during the day sometimes come from a longer distance. So, but yeah, that's 100% correct. So I mean, it's only, the system only works as well as how fast we can get a volunteer there, right? It's still no different. So. On the 911 side, I always like to highlight this because this was kind of one of those things that we discussed when we first started hiring staff is kind of, where do we take our patients? Well, 90% of our patients still go to Saunders Medical Center based on their needs. So we're still hitting that same mark as far as really only about 10% of our patients from a 911 call are going to a facility outside of Wahoo. And that's usually based on an objective reason, right? They're having a heart attack, they're having a stroke, they met the criteria for trauma from a car accident or a fall. Those types of patients are the types of patients that we take directly to a specialty resource center. So we're trying to, manage our resources the best we can. We don't like to take our ambulances out of town more than we have to. So it's important that we use the criteria that we use because we have a perfectly capable emergency department out here to handle a good chunk of our care and emergencies. Now, it doesn't mean they don't end up getting transferred later, but as far as somebody with an acute and emergent need to go to another facility, it's only about 1 out of 10 that we end up taking out of town. So just some other things we're working on. We still have an open full-time paramedic position. It's been open for a few months now. The trend and pattern in the industry is that there is a ton of paramedic jobs and not a ton of paramedics available. So there's an increase in hiring. A lot of the smaller hospitals are picking up on the need for paramedics. I know that our neighbors to the south are in the process of handling this type of same issue. So we've only had probably 3 or 4 applicants for a full-time position, one of which actually has experience. And our situation is unique because there's a lot of autonomy and independence in being a paramedic in Wahoo because sometimes you're the only person. So it puts us in kind of a different disadvantage on really needing somebody with a little bit of experience to provide that high level of care. So it's still open. We're keeping it open. It's posted everywhere, Indeed, online. I know our social media page posts our openings pretty regularly. So we're going to keep moving forward on that. So recently we met with Saunders County Fair board and staff, working on planning with them as far as for the fair events, but also just working together in partnership on how we can manage those events as those events continue to grow, having kind of an updated emergency operations plan. We'll have a more active role in how they plan their events in terms of evacuation and emergency preparedness, and there's been a great dialogue opened up with Lene and their team down there as far as making sure that the visitors of the community are safe throughout the entire week of events. So we're doing another mass casualty drill with Saunders Medical Center and the county as a whole. We're going to simulate a bus accident in August. So that'll be down possibly at the fairgrounds, depending on what kind of activities are going on down there. Otherwise, we might find a new location for that. But again, continuously trying to test our abilities and get better in terms of large-scale events in the area. Not sure if this was reported. I'm not sure the last time Cody was here, but I wanted to highlight that the fire department, with our assistance in terms of the data and the tracking of information to apply for this grant, the fire department was successful in achieving grant funding through the Jack Lewis Safety Fund, which is through, I think, one of the Omaha foundations, for a drone. So our department will have access now to a drone that will have the basic drone capabilities, and including to add some thermal imaging and some other things to allow us to utilize in both a first response capability, but also we talked about with recent flooding, it'd be a great tool to have for surveying and can be used citywide as far as, you know, whatever our needs might be for that drone. So we'll work through kind of our protocols on how we're going to utilize that and when we're going to utilize that and get people trained and educated. But it's pretty exciting to have an asset like that in the community to utilize. So, lastly, just it's important to note that it's our year. We have, through the federal government, have to provide a ton of information to CMS in terms of ground ambulance data collection. So I'll be working on that with a good chunk of my time for the next few months to capture a year's worth of data. There's probably over a couple hundred data points that we have to report month to month. That includes 13 different sections of data, from the financials to the response times to our supply usage to our staffing to everything. So we're not really sure where it came from, if it's just a data capture tool that they're trying to assess ground ambulances across the country, but we're unfortunately up this year, so we'll be working on that information. The only two things I have is the ambulance and then the radio project. If you want me to speak to that at all, or so we've been trying to work with the county as much as they'll let us as far as the Saunders County radio project goes. It is moving forward, slow but steady. We were given the RFP for the radio infrastructure sites that's supposed to be going out soon, and those bids could be accepted in August, I think, if that's correct. We've been working more on the ground level with Tom Christensen and their team as far as kind of starting to lay out the framework of how we want the system to work, you know, from our point of view, how we want to have it set up for our talk groups and at the end user level of things, because it's better to have that in place now as they start rolling that out. So I know there's still some funding questions out in the air. The county still hasn't made a clear position on how they're going to handle the allocation of the end user radios in terms of mobiles and portables. The Assistance to Firefighters grant, which was supposed to capitalize on a large portion of that portable radio cost, is still not awarded. They're probably going to award that this fall, so more to come on that. I do know that Congressman Bacon had some money that was allocated to some of that. I'm now being told that that's not quite there yet, so hopefully that lands where it should. So still a lot of questions to be asked as far as our financial responsibility as an agency, and my opinion is that needs to be figured out sooner than later, because if everything goes well with infrastructure, there's a potential we could go live on this system within the next 12 months. So I don't want any surprises come budget time on us having to go live. So that's kind of where we landed on that. The county's got a few agreements they have to work on as far as tower sites and those types of things. But if anybody's curious about that, we're sent typically monthly updates. So I'm more than happy to share those if any of you or Melissa can as well, just to kind of get you up to speed. So, sorry. Any questions for me? Ambulance. I'll probably let Melissa speak to that. She's
that's
yeah.
fine.
So, all right.
Radios are setting okay then on the radios? I know in claims we paid for a few radios.
Yeah, I think so. I do. I think we're still looking for a cash, come go live time. But honestly speaking, we could get by today if we went live. We found out that some of the radios that we had purchased previously are going to be end of life, even though they're the same model as what we're buying today. So,
Really?
You know how it goes with technology. So we're working through that, but we're optimistic that, one, we're in good shape, but two, we'll be able to use a large chunk of grant funding